One introduction RFK view the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RFK view purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to residents against wood smoke emission particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, or RASEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RASEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Episode 57 DHXN July 29, 2025 Coal plants emailed the Trump EPA to avoid clean air rules. In episode 57 DHXN 1 Fight for Vaccines 2 KFF Health Newsletter 3 PBS News here is the deal that deep concern over the RFK Junior reported plans to oust another medical panel 4 New York Times Climate Forward Newsletter the Trump Impossible Energy Deal with the European Union EU5 webinar How We Make Environmental Progress Now Join the Southern Environmental Law. Center July 31st at 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time for a free webinar on advancing protections for clean air and water even as federal safeguards are under attack. 6 headlines July 29th. 2025 air pollution from dirty industry coal plants emailed the EPA to avoid clean air rules main content. One Fight for Vaccines join us today July 29th at 3 p.m. ET on Substack Live Jeremy, Faust MD Paul Offit, and Dorit Reiss July 29th. 2025 with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at the helm of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Many of our worst fears about vaccine access are starting to materialize. Vaccine policy is being changed summarily at the FDA and CDC, and without the usual transparency or processes. Voting members of the CDC Vaccine Advisory Panel have been fired only to be replaced by a panel handpicked by RFK Junior American. Support for GAVI, the Global Vaccine Alliance, will soon end, and now RFK Jr. wants to change the rules so that anti-vaxxers might be able to sue vaccine manufacturers out of existence. To fight back against all of this, we need to be informed on the facts. Today, July 29th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, I will be joined on Substack Live in the Lounge of Doctors by a mini power panel Dr. Paul Offit and Professor Dorit Reiss. You will not find better expertise. Dr. Offit is a co-inventor of the rotavirus vaccine. Against all odds, he remains a member of the FDA Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee, at least for now. The Dr. Offit is Substack Beyond the Noise has provided incredibly important information on this topic lately. Professor Reiss of UC San Francisco Law is one of the leading experts on public health law and has been an especially key voice on vaccines. Her article on the vaccine injury compensation program posted yesterday is essential reading. Please join us today at 3 p.m. ET. Notes risk-benefit analysis always done on vaccines. Example of the live oral polio vaccine, which rarely could actually cause polio until around the year 2000. Around the year 2000, the oral polio vaccine was stopped. We now use the inactivated polio vaccine, which is safer. Kennedy is close-mouthed on what he wants to change except add injury causing autism to compensable claims if ACIP removes recommendations. Can tell DOJ to consider compensation without full litigation. One participant chatted that he believes RFK Jr. is trying to cull the population to a KFF Health Newsletter Tuesday, July 29th. 2025 Rural Dispatch. South Dakota tribal health officials work to fill vaccination gaps as measles outbreak spreads. Rapid City, South Dakota. Cassandra Palmier had been meaning to get her son the second and final dose of the measles vaccine, but car problems made it difficult to get to the doctor, so she pounced on the opportunity to get him vaccinated after learning that a mobile clinic would be visiting her neighborhood. I was definitely concerned about the epidemic and the measles. Palmier, a member of the Oglala Sioux Tribe, said at the June event, I wanted to do my part. So did her son. I am not going to be scared, the 5-year-old announced as he walked onto the bus containing the clinic and hopped into an exam chair. He sat still as a nurse gave him the shot in his arm. I did it, he said while smiling at his mother. The vaccine clinic was hosted by the Great Plains Tribal Leader Health Board, which serves tribes across Iowa, Nebraska, and the Dakotas. It is one way Native American tribes and organizations are responding to concerns about low measles vaccination rates and difficulty for patient access to health care as the disease spreads across the country. 2B healthcare costs and coverage. Republican megabill will mean higher health costs for many Americans. Cuts hitting medical providers. Medicaid and Affordable Care Act enrollees and lawfully present immigrants are just some of the biggest changes the GOP has in store for healthcare, with ramifications that could touch all Americans. The tightening could mean fewer health services, especially in rural areas, which often depend more on federal health dollars. To see in a first Trump and GOP-led Congress prepare to swell ranks of U.S. uninsured. Fewer Americans will have health insurance, compromising their physical and financial health as the Trump administration and GOP-controlled Congress weigh major changes to the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid. The effects could be catastrophic. One policy analyst predicts 2D in rush to satisfy Trump. GOP delivers blow to health industry. The health industry could not persuade GOP lawmakers to oppose big Medicaid cuts in the Trump tax and spending bill for many reasons. A big one, congressional Republicans were more worried about angering Trump than a backlash from hospitals and low-income constituents. Back home, too, a $50 billion rural health slush fund faces questions. Skepticism. Lawmakers added a $50 billion program for rural health to the Trump massive tax and spending package with promises it would help plug the hole left by Medicaid cuts. Rural hospital and clinic leaders worry the infusion will not reach the right places. To FKFF Health News. What the health? Here come the ACA premium hikes. Medicaid may have monopolized the attention of Washington lately, but substantial changes are coming to the Affordable Care Act. Meanwhile, Americans are learning more about what is in the Trump big budget law, and polls suggest many do not like what they see. 2G mental health. The foster care system has a suicide problem. Federal cuts threaten to slow fixes. Children and young adults in the U.S. foster care system suffer from mental health disorders and die by suicide at far higher rates than the general population. Yet the system does not uniformly screen and treat children who are at risk. 2H reproductive health. Doulas. Once Medicaid increasingly covers a luxury, even in GOP states, even as states brace for significant reductions in federal Medicaid funding over the next decade, conservative legislatures across the country are passing laws that grant doula access to Medicaid beneficiaries. 2. iPublic Health. SNAP versus Maha. 4.2 cuts to food benefits stand in the way of the RFK Jr. goals for a healthier national diet. The Trump administration has said improving American nutrition is a priority, but deep cuts to federal food assistance could lead people to forego healthy food in favor of cheaper alternatives. 2J. Amid PFAS fallout, a Maine doctor navigates medical risks with her patients. A doctor doing environmental health research in rural Maine is working to establish the best practices to treat patients exposed to forever chemicals, potentially leading the way for Practitioners across the nation 2K surprise bills. Insurers fight state laws restricting surprise ambulance bills. A Colorado bill banning surprise billing for ambulance rides passed unanimously in both legislative chambers, only to be met with a veto from the governor. As more states pass such legislation, some are hitting the same snag: concerns about raising premiums. 3 PBS News. Here is the deal. July 29, 2025. The deep concern over the RFK Junior reported plans to oust another medical panel. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy may be making major changes to another influential medical panel of experts weeks after firing all members of a key vaccine advisory panel. Kennedy plans to remove all 16 members of the United States Preventive Services Task Force, the Wall Street Journal reported late last week. What is the USPSTF? The panel plays a key role in determining what treatments insurers must cover and makes recommendations about care that are followed by doctors across the country. That includes cancer and diabetes screenings and other preventative health measures such as HIV and cholesterol drugs. Why is Kennedy planning to oust the panel? People familiar with the situation told the Journal that he views the panel members as too woke. There was a swift rebuke. The American Medical Association released a letter Sunday expressing deep concern over the Kennedy possible plan to remove USPSTF members. Dr. Bobby Mukamala, surgeon and AMA president, said this kind of move could have big implications for the healthcare system, especially for the some 100 million privately insured people who get preventative services each year at no cost under requirements of the Affordable Care Act. Mukamala said the current makeup of the panel was doing a good job providing useful recommendations based on science. Not knowing what is going to come next is putting the health of patients at risk and the health of this country at risk, he said for New York Times Climate Forward newsletter. July 29, 2025. The Trump impossible energy deal with the European Union. EU. When the Trump administration reached a trade deal with the European Union this week, the tariffs got much of the attention, but the agreement also includes a remarkable provision that could more than triple the amount of oil and gas America sells to the European Union under the trade deal. The 27-country bloc says it will buy $250 billion in energy resources from the United States every year through the end of the Trump term. That is a huge jump from the $70 billion it now buys, mainly in the form of crude oil and liquefied natural gas. Analysts say it would be almost impossible to meet that sales target. Fossil fuels have shaped American interests abroad for decades, but rarely has an American administration used fossil fuel exports so aggressively as a political and economic tool in the energy choices countries make. This will strengthen the energy dominance of the United States, reduce European reliance on adversarial sources, and narrow our trade deficit with the European Union. EU. The administration said in a fact sheet referring to the European Union, EU stated objective to reduce, if not eliminate, its purchasing of fuel from Russia. A deal to buy so much energy from one country flies in the face of the other worry of Europe energy security. Europe has been succeeding at weaning itself off Russian gas, but the Trump deal could risk locking independence on the United States, and that is not the only question surrounding the details of the agreement. Could Europe even buy that much? No, according to energy industry analysts, the dollar figure is so far away from what is really possible that it has the hallmarks of something said just to get an agreement over the line. The official statistics of the European Union EU show that it imported an estimated $70 billion of oil and gas from the United States and $26 billion from Russia last year. So even if the European Union replaced all its Russian imports with American ones, which is a tall order on its own, given that U.S. fuels are shipped rather than piped, it would not make it halfway to the target of the agreement. Europe is also rapidly adding renewable energy infrastructure. The countries of the European Union together are the leading importers of Chinese-made solar panels, and China now sells 1 in 5 electric vehicles bought in Europe. The European Union has adopted a law to have renewable energy sources make up at least 42.5% of its energy consumption by 2030, up from a quarter currently. Europe is well on its way to independence thanks to the rapid growth of renewables, said a former French climate diplomat who now heads the European Climate Foundation and advocacy group. It does not need more high-price, high-risk liquefied natural gas (LNG). There is another hitch. It is unlikely that European Union EU political leaders have authority to dictate whom private companies buy energy from. The agreement says it could also include the export of American nuclear technology to Europe, but analysts said the most promising technologies around a new generation of reactors were still years away from being ready to deploy. Could Trump slow down European climate ambitions? It could in two ways. First, if Europeans end up buying more oil and gas over the next 3 years, it would increase European climate pollution. Second, U.S. gas is in liquefied form, and its carbon dioxide emissions are 10 times that of an equivalent volume of piped gas from Russia and elsewhere. That is because more energy is required to liquefy it, transport it by ship, and turn it back into gas. The Trump deal could also bolster the Trump far-right political allies in Europe who have sought to scuttle the European Union EU targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Over time, the European Commission, the executive arm of the bloc, has proposed reducing the planet-warming emissions of the bloc by 90% by 2040 compared with 1990 levels. The European Parliament has yet to agree on the proposal. This is not just about Europe. Fossil fuels were a central focus of the other recently announced trade deals of the United States. Japan, for instance, agreed to invest billions of dollars in the United States, including on a major expansion of U.S. energy imports. According to the White House, the Trump administration has been pressuring Japan, South Korea, and other Asian nations for months to finance a $44 billion liquefied natural gas project in Alaska. The project has been stalled for many years over questions of who will pay for it and whether Asian demand will last long enough into the future to justify it. Most liquefied natural gas projects have an estimated lifespan of 40 to 50 years, and countries like Japan and South Korea have pledged to make their economies carbon neutral by 2055. Webinar, How We Make Environmental Progress. Now join the Southern Environmental Law Center July 31st at 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time for a free webinar on advancing protections for clean air and water, even as federal safeguards are under attack. From federal litigation to local advocacy, SELC experts will share how they are stepping up alongside communities to protect what matters most. Hear about key issues playing out across the South and how together we can create real solutions. 6 headlines July 29th. 2025 air pollution from dirty industry coal plants. Email filed the Trump EPA to avoid clean air rules, the New York Times air pollution causing climate change and other pollution causing climate change. The EPA plans to revoke the legal basis for tackling climate change. The New York Times cleaner transport than gas guzzling cars monopoly of railroads. Union Pacific to buy Norfolk Southern in $85 billion railroad deal. The New York Times climate change mitigation. Pets like dogs and cats have an environmental cost. Here is how to lessen it. The New York Times Trump is the crypto man in the White House. Opinion. The crypto man in the White House. The New York Times Trump and Epstein fallout. Opinion. The Epstein credibility crisis of the Trump Justice Department. New York Times Trump tariffs stock plunges 20 after profit warning of the Ozempic maker. The New York Times Trump tariffs Powell under siege as Fed plans to stand pat on rate cuts. The New York Times Trump tariffs effect on consumers. Shoppers embrace Christmas in July amid rising costs and tariff limbo. The New York Times medicine and science Rozep view. Can we trust RFK Jr. to restrict a drug on purely scientific grounds? Do the benefits of the drug outweigh scientifically proven risks of the drug? Is RFK Jr. holding a drug hostage waiting for a payment to him personally from a drug company following the Trump playbook on Trump tariffs, etc.? From the article headline, RFK Jr. announces plan to restrict opioid-like kratom product. The New York Times Scotland and Trump Scottish leader talks Gaza tariffs and Ukraine in meeting with Trump. The New York Times Europe and Trump in Scotland. How European leaders coax Trump on Ukraine. The New York Times Russia and Ukraine Russian strike on prison kills 16 Ukraine, says the New York Times. Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. Rozep view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove. International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rozep view. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.